around here. I see we have our Berkeley County Supervisor with us. Would you just raise your hand? That's the big wig, man. That's the big guy for the whole county. The whole county. We have our sheriff right here again. And Rachel Knight, our tourism coordinator for the whole county. And then whatever, the rest of y'all, whatever. I'm a whatever too. This is, we're going to talk tonight.
Don't forget Corey.
Oh, Corey, city council member Corey McClary. Thank you so much, Corey. And Frank Johnson, thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. You're the important people here tonight, and I want to just make sure I focus on you again and again and again. The title of this tonight is 18 Mile House Tavern, Cradle of the Deep South. But before we get into that, I'd like to just ask some questions. Do you have a favorite memory from last week or something you think was, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, or something? Anybody have anything, questions you may want to ask before we kick it off? But we're going to get going. We're going to go fast. Okay. So you weren't paying attention last week, were you? Very well.
It wasn't very good.
The what? It wasn't very good? Thank you. Well, before we go, where is the tavern? Can you point?
Masonic Lodge and Pit Stop.
That's two of them there. It used to be, many acres in there, and we're going to talk about that tonight. But that was really kind of the commercial center of South Carolina for a couple decades. So that's why we're going to get into it. This is our schedule coming up, and this is what I do not want anybody to miss. I was working on this one this morning. Blackbeard, Watery Jack, Ghost and Ghouls. You'll never forget that program. It's a really cool program. And it's the true ghosts and the true ghouls and the true stories that took place right here in Goose Creek. You're going to love it. So don't miss that. You can miss all the other ones, but don't miss that one next week. Now, just before we get going, I wanted to ask you and visit this church a little bit. This is the St. James Goose Creek Church. The parish was created in 1706, and then the church, every parish was supposed to build a church, and this one was built. That is the symbol of the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. It's a missionary society, okay? And then it's a bas relief of a pelican feeding 3 little hatchlings. And then the 5 hearts on the bottom represent the 5 known continents at the time. At least a real smart guy told me that. He had a doctor in divinity, and he was commanding the whatever for the whole world, and so he told me that's what he thought it was. So that's what I go with. But, and this is some of the features inside. Isn't that pretty doggone fancy for a church? Yeah. That is the best technology of the time when they had that twisted spiral staircase going up to the sermon, the podium. And above that is vibrating woods. A wood up here that would, they thought it would amplify the voice of the minister. But the thing that really kind of ties this whole venture into last week is that Royal House of Hanover. You see over the pulpit, up against the wall, is the Royal House of Hanover. Do you see that little cross on the pulpit? That whole thing was over on the side, and they moved it. It was over here. This was over here. That's where it was built. And there's a place in the floor where you can see where it was sunk in the floor at one time. Then they moved it in the front. But originally you could come into the church, and over the altar was the royal seal, the Royal House of Hanover. And outside, there is no cross, there's no crucifix, there's no symbol of anything that we know traditionally holy about that church. But it's very strongly screaming out the fact to you that it's a political place. It's a royal establishment. It's a royal institution. Remember last week we were talking about the royalty. People, there was 2 classes of people. You're either royal, that is you're the descendant from William the Normandy, the descendant, and you had royal blood and you had rights and powers, or you were nothing. If you were white and you had nothing. If you were black, you were treated like an animal. Okay, that's pretty much the level that the world was faced with. I wanted to get into that because we were talking about the royalty last week. This week we're going to talk about a man who wasn't royal at all and became the second most powerful man in Goose Creek in the South Carolina colony, the whole colony, and he was not royal, had no connection to royalty. So how did he do it? We're going to find out tonight. The Goose Creek men, they're the founding fathers of the Deep South. They owned the land here along Goose Creek on both sides, and they were the descendants from royalty. And they were the richest and most horrifying, they came from Barbados, the richest and most horrifying society in the English-speaking world. That is used as an excuse for why they were so mean and nasty, and why they had such a harsh slave code, and why they treated white people that were not royal, not like animals, but you had no rights. You had no court rights, you had no right to own property, you couldn't do anything. You could only work for the guy that owned the property who was a royalist. And then the other guy, M. Eugene Sermons, he said the men from Goose Creek were primarily interested in dominating the affairs of South Carolina so they could build fortunes in any way possible. So I'm not the only guy that said that these fellows were good-for-nothing rascals. Other authors that study the history of South Carolina concur. They're good-for-nothing rascals. The Goose Creek men, but they were the founding fathers of the Deep South. And we talked about the Deep South culture. Does it make you feel nice and warm and cozy and cuddly? Or does it make you feel kind of sick and angry? And how in the heck could we do that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to take a poll, but you know, the feelings are mixed, and I'm kind of trying to understand. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle trying to figure that out. I like Southern cooking. That's a good part of the Southern traditions that I like. The Deep South culture was conceived, we're going to do this very quickly because we went over this last week, conceived in England, born in the Caribbean, and reared from his cradle in Goose Creek, South Carolina. That's the 18-mile house. That's where that Deep South culture was spread so rapidly. It was conceived in England. Now, who knows the date of the Battle of Hastings? Yes, what's your name?
1066.
October 14th.
What?
October 14th.
Did you know it was October 14th? God, he knows everything. He does. He's a Yankee. He's from like, oh, is that where you got it from, the paper this morning?
I listened to you this morning at breakfast.
Okay. And this is when William the Conqueror, he conquered England and declared that all the land belonged to him. Then he started giving some his friends and royal and relatives some of the land, and that's where you got that class of royalty. The Deep South culture was conceived in England. William the Conqueror ruled all, landed gentry, sons of royalty, the caste system, slavery, the Scots, the Irish, the English, and English tribes were all slaves after William the Conqueror conquered England. And Richard the Lionheart went on the crusade and came back with the symbol of the Near East, which was the moon god. And he brought the moon god symbol back, which was the crescent that he wore on his heraldry. So they came here to Goose Creek from Barbados, and there's a map of Barbados there. There's a tiny little pea of an island. Looks like a lima bean right there. And it's shaped kind of like a lima bean after you cook it and drop it. Let's see if you're paying attention. But that's where we came from, because it was a sugar-producing island, had a lot of rich people that were sent there because they were royal. And their sons could not inherit the land, so their sons came here. For example, last week I remember telling you that we had Benjamin Middleton. Anybody ever hear of Benjamin Middleton besides last week? He was a second son in England. He couldn't inherit the land in England, so he went to Barbados. And in Barbados, he had a very profitable and successful sugar plantation. And his oldest son was Benjamin, so he inherited the big plantation in Barbados. But then he had two other sons. He had Arthur and he had Edward Middleton. And they came here. One went to Otranto and one went to the Oaks. So I just wanted to kind of tell you that, because that's how we build up this royal class that nobody else is allowed to be in. The reason for the enslavement and deportation of the Irish was made clear by King James I of England, who ordered, "Root out the Papists and fill it with Protestants." Root out the Papists, that's the Pope's people, and fill Ireland with Protestants. Now, what did he do with those Irish? Well, he put them on ships. They were prisoners of war. You could call them prisoners of war, even the women and the children. You can call them prisoners of war. You can call them slaves. They didn't want to go. They didn't sign a contract. There's no indentured servants. And they were sent, about over 50,000 Irish men, women, and children were sent to Barbados. and other Caribbean islands. And they were called lots of legs. We went over all the names of all the different ways their legs were described, and their fair skin was described last week, but they were called mostly red legs. Oh, and I don't think that those are real photographs of slaves, Irish slaves. I think those are photographs of their descendants, okay? And they're still down there, and I think I told you that I met with the Prime Minister of Barbados a couple times. He would come up here, and we'd go to lunch and do stuff, and I said, if I go down to Barbados, could I meet some of the red legs? Because he called them red legs. And he said, oh, sure, Mike. He said, sure. He said, they come into town on the weekends. And I'll take you down and introduce you to some of them. And I thought, they must be segregated. If they just, he didn't know that. They just came in on weekends. So you still got them in Barbados. You still got the people that we came from here in Goose Creek, theoretically, down there in Barbados still. Reared from his cradle in Goose Creek, the Goose Creek men led at the tip of the spear. The Goose Creek men dominated. They expanded control throughout South Carolina. And then the sons of these Goose Creek men went into North Carolina and Georgia and spread the Deep South culture there. Soon, that arrangement converted several indigenous Native American tribes into proxy armies that expanded the West Indies slave-based culture deeper into the Carolina wilderness until the influence of the Goose Creek men reached throughout the frontier colony. They were the tip of the spear. This was the southern part of North America, and included Florida and its panhandle, and Georgia, and South Carolina, North Carolina. And they were the tip of the spear for the British Empire. The Goose Creek men treated their native slaves like fixed possessions, not unlike cattle or mules, as they did in Barbados. But the harsh treatment affronted moral men such as Francis Lejeune, an Anglican minister in Goose Creek. So they started taking a lot of slaves, Indian slaves, and sending them down to the Caribbean to work on the Caribbean sugar islands, and then they're buying and importing African slaves to work here. How come? Who knows the answer to that? Why didn't they just capture some Indians and make them work on the plantations here? Why do they have to import Africans? Yeah.
They would run away.
The Indians would just walk away. They knew how to survive around here. They'd take off. Every plantation in this area kept an Indian. That's what they would say. We kept an Indian. He would come and go to the back, come to the back door and give them a turkey that he shot, and they'll get a little treat back or get a little tip or something. Every plantation kept an Indian, and sometimes the Indians would go back home and be gone for a month and then come back and report to the plantation. But the ones that were captured and sent down to the Caribbean sugar islands, that was a whole different story. They were treated harshly down there, and they didn't survive very well down there either. I hear that our Confederate Indians are now sent to war by our traders to get slaves, the priest rued. The bloody war is dolefully watched as traders with hundreds of these poor souls trudge past his parsonage less than 2 miles south of the 18-mile staging ground. Goose Creek land, he wrote that several times in his letters to the commission. He was reported to the commission for missionaries, and he said several times he would always get upset when he had the long lines of Indian slaves being marched down past his parsonage. You know where the Oaks Plantation Avenue is, and the parsonage was right at the mouth of that, and he would watch them come and then go over the Goose Creek Bridge, and it was very upsetting to him. I think it would be upsetting to any of us to see these human beings tied leg to leg. Goose Creek landowners modeled after English gentry pursued ostentatious lifestyles like they did back in Barbados. Indeed, the elite planter believed that the underclass existed solely to underpin his lofty aspirations. They owned homes in Charleston but kept country seats as their plantation adorned, as was in vogue in England. And this is a pretty impressive rendering of Crowfield Plantation. That's just the 3 main houses and then the artificial gardens around it. They never made a nickel out of Crowfield. It was just for show. Their entrance avenue was a mile long, lined with trees. You can still see some of them just a few of them from the golf course over there. So here we are now ready for tonight's lecture, and this is Lecture 2, 18 Mile House Tavern. And I want you to remember to be here next week, Blackbeard, Watery Jack, Ghosts and Ghouls, and we'll have to have more chairs brought in for you all. I don't see any. And for you all too. Sorry. Hi. Okay, 18 Mile House Tavern. Goose Creek men parlayed their resources into a robust Native American deerskin trade and expanded the profitable skin and peltry trade to more affluent Native American slave exchanges with the sugar planters in the West Indies. Pack horse traders, they would take these, they would take industrial products that they would buy from the merchants in Charleston or from the ship captains in Charleston or for the pirates in the ships down in Charleston Harbor, and they would put these on the back of horses. At first, they would carry them themselves, but when they got wealthy enough to afford to buy a horse, then you would buy a horse and use it as a pack animal. And they started trading with the Indians for skins. And this is the roadway. You can get an idea how important the 18 Mile House Tavern was right here. This was the bridge. Come across the bridge, you go past the parsonage. This is the entrance to the Oaks Plantation home. And you go past up here to the 18 Mile House Tavern, and this is where we are right now, okay? Sitting right here. And that was critically important that it sat there. And when you went further, you went up to the past the other taverns. This is right near City Hall right here. Just kind of give you an idea. Really, the roadways were incredibly important because when you come out of Charleston, this is Goose Creek right here. When you come out of Charleston, you can't go this way with a pack animal or carrying stuff on your back. And this way was, the Ashley River was here. So right smack in the middle was like a shopping center where people began to congregate from all across the peninsula because that's where you could go and go north. You could go, if you wanted to go from Charleston to the Appalachian Mountains, to Cherokee country in North Carolina, you had to go this way. You couldn't go any other way. There was no other way to get there. There was no bridges. And you couldn't carry the stuff in your pack horse animal through the waterways. So you had to come this way. The 18 Mile House Tavern was at the center of commerce. And as the traffic gets worse and worse and worse, you can tell how important that way is. There was no such thing as Highway 52 until 1933. So this bridge here, the Goose Creek Bridge, was the only way to go inland. And as you came inland, you could stop at the 18 Mile House Tavern, and you could see the roads go out in all directions. And the bridge was covered by 1730. This is not a picture, a photograph of the Goose Creek Bridge. I've never been able to find one, but I did find a description among the records of the South Carolina Department of Engineer or something. I found a description of the bridge that used to be here. Yes, Sheriff?
Mike, where are you gauging the 18 miles from Charleston?
Yes.
Okay. So 18 miles from that spot.
Yes, to the 18 Mile House is 18 miles from Charleston. I was afraid you were going to ask me where in Charleston, because I don't know that answer. I would have to bluff it out or something.
The bridge is actually on NAD Road
Yes, the bridge is on the NAD Road. Yes, sir. Yeah.
because it wasn't 52 and that was too forest.
Yes.
Woods. So
Now,
it was on the edge.
If you can tell me why there's two main avenues here, I'll give you a free book. See the two avenues? This is the 18 Mile House.
One-way traffic.
And you can see the ponds. This is where Food Line is, right in here. You got ponds. This is part of Pineview now. And you have a pond up here which flows into Crowfield and through Crowfield. And you have these two avenues that go to where we are. But I don't know why there's two avenues. I've never been able to figure that out. And there's one other set of plantation homes that have two avenues just side by side. We don't have to get into all that tonight, but there must have been a reason for it, or maybe they were just angry neighbors. I don't know. There's the 18 Mile House. Later on, it doesn't have the road going to the Button Hall where we're standing today, but it does show you a two-story home here. These are out, probably this is where the barns were. This is where they would camp out all through here and around these ponds. They would camp out and water their animals, graze their animals, and sometimes they would stay here for days until they had enough pack horse traders together to pack up and go back and go into the mountain, go into the frontier, because it was dangerous out there. You couldn't travel by yourself, but if you did, you wouldn't last more than a day or two. So they'd probably get up to 18, 19, 20 pack horse traders at a time. And then the Negro Yard is where the slave houses were for this plantation that we're standing on. And that's where Brandywine Apartments are today. And when you go down there, I've said this before, but look up at the power line easements because they follow the old road system. You can see sitting in the parking lot of the gas station there, across the street is Westview Boulevard. And that power line holds the electricity. It was over the road. The road went that way all the way to the Ashley River. Now, it didn't go over the Ashley River until they built the Bacon Bridge Road, but it went all the way to the Ashley River. And then in the other direction, there's the intersection. That's why the place was so busy. In the other direction, it went all the way to the Cooper River. So here it is, and somebody earlier told me what was here, and you got the Masonic Lodge. Oh yeah, Mike did. Masonic Lodge and the Pit Stop and some of the others. But that also had lots of land around it with water, Pineview subdivision, and where the shopping center, the Creekside Shopping Center is today, and the Food Line Shopping Center, that was all grazing grounds for their horses. Horses were precious and very, very expensive. This guy here is the main character for tonight, George Chicken. He was a Goose Creek man. Now, last week we learned that the Goose Creek man were royalty. They were the founding fathers of the Deep South. They believed that they truly were descendants from Norman kings and that they had the right to own land and nobody else did. And Tony Young, where's Tony? Raise your hand, Tony. Tony drew me this picture of George Chicken for me, just by lots of observations and reading and discussion, and came up with that, and I think it's perfect. Natives trade, they'd take their pack horses out and come with industrial products and come back with deer skins. And they made a lot of money. They could only manage 4 or 5 horses each. I couldn't find anybody that ever managed more than 5 horses. You would not ride one. You could ride the horse, or you could put 100 pounds of trade goods on it. Which would you rather do? You'd rather walk and take those trade goods in. 18 Mile House Tavern was not a tavern as we know today. You know, you think I'm going to go to a tavern and have a nice cold beer and listen to the jukebox or something. No, there's nothing like that going on. You could camp on the grounds and sleep on the grounds. You could water your horses and graze your horses. And the guy, and we're going to talk more about the 18 Mile House Tavern, more details as it goes right on through the Civil War and right on up to modern time. But let me finish this. Sure. But he normally would have like a big kettle of soup or something over an open fire, and you know, for a penny you might be able to get a big bowl of soup or something. But that's all there was as far as a tavern. Yes, ma'am.
When was it established, the
Don't-
tavern? Or what?
Do not ask difficult questions.
I'll leave it
Who do you think you are?
Dismissed.
Must have gone to Clemson or something, you know. When was it established? 18 Mile House Tavern. It was established on August 8th. Pick a number out. The 18 Mile House Tavern. I can't get anything in my head right now. I'm sorry. It'll come to me tonight.
Approximately, was it 1730?
Oh, approximately it was in the 1600s. I would say 1680.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It was probably when you say established. That's why I couldn't understand. Do you mean the buildings built there, or are they grazing there? They were naturally grazing there, 18 miles from Charleston. Soon after they got here, that was 1660s, 1670s, 1680s. You got that?
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, that's going to be on the test.
Good. I'll get 100.
A successful trader returned each pack horse with 100 fully dressed doe skins, 75 buck skins, or equally weighty collection of various peltries. And here is a list of items you could trade for deer skins. See, number 1 is a gun. And you had to have 16 deer skins for that. You get a gun. And the trade muskets weren't worth a darn. They were junk. And you had to go to a gunsmith very frequently, about every 3 or 4 months with one of these muskets. I don't know guns well enough to be able to tell you what was wrong with it, but they had a reputation of being real shoddy. And what else do you see? A laced hat, 3 deer skins, a laced hat.
What's a ditto?
Oh, a ditto must be the same thing as just before it. Where is that ditto? Oh, a ditto not laced would be a 12. That would be a half thick or plain coat gartering laced. This is just word for word and letter for letter. Their Indian Commission came up with this. They're cheating the Indians so badly, they finally came up with what fair prices were. Shop. Huh? Vermilion? Well, everybody knows that. Who would like to answer that?
It's a red powder that the Indians used for makeup.
Of course. I forgot all about it. I didn't know what it was either. I used to be a high school teacher. We'd always use that trick. Oh, of course I know that. Who else knows that? Yeah. Vermilion would be the red. What did they use it for? The vermilion, the red powder?
To mark their faces.
Oh, okay. Makeup and war paint. Okay. And people in Europe purchased these deer skins for all kinds of reasons, coats and vests and jackets and shoes and boots and all kinds of stuff. And it was all it was the first step in what they referred to as mercantilism in the British Empire. And they have entire books written on mercantilism, but in a nutshell, it means we're not going to buy anything from a foreign country. Doesn't matter what it is, we're only going to buy it from English businesses. And if you want something, you can come buy it from us. You're probably going to have to give us gold for it or other precious metal. But we're not going to buy anything from you. That means we're going to have to produce our own stuff within our empire. And much of that we're going to have to come from South Carolina and North Carolina. Like gold. Is there much gold in South Carolina? No, there never was any. Never was much. There's a little bit. You can still find some now if you work hard enough. Up in where was that, Tony, you were telling me about the gold?
Well, there was some in McCormick County was one place, and I think closer to the North Carolina border.
Right. Do you know of any place where there was a good amount?
I don't know what a good amount is.
I mean, make it worth digging up and working to get it? You know, if you can work a week and get a nickel's worth of gold, that's not worth it, you know, but I've never heard. And my rendering was that there wasn't enough gold anywhere to make that something that you could sell. And what about wine and grapes? That's something else that the English wanted us to raise here. Wine and grapes. Why not? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's not common enough. And olives and capers. Oranges. Why you say yeah, Tony?
Well, people in Goose Creek have them. So. If you're going of Crowville Plantation, it had orange trees.
Charlestown Landing has some with the thorns.
I have lemons.
I read, if you told me the lady's name, I would know it. But she had a recipe, her recipes were down at the Historical Society, and being the nerd that I am, I was reading her recipes. What did she have? And one of them called for oranges. And she said, keep the oranges, do not pick the oranges from the trees until the rind is thick and brittle. Then you can pick it and use it in what she was making some sort of a dessert out of it, cooking it and making it into a dessert. I thought, well, why do we must have oranges here. Yeah. We do have oranges here. We can grow oranges here if you want. We can grow them right here in Goose Creek, but you got to keep them warm during those cold nights. Yeah. When it gets around 50 degrees, you got problems. If you get below that, they're going to die. What they did here is they had their slaves stay up all night, a few of them, and keep smut fires burning and keep that smoke going up around the trees. Very expensive way to get an orange. Why didn't they just grow them down in Florida and truck them up here like we do today? It's a lot cheaper. They just didn't have that choice. But I thought that was, I don't know why I was reading a recipe book, but I learned that from reading that. Don't pick it until the rind is thick and coarse. You all quit talking. I'm sorry, I'm a retired teacher. I can stand at a quarter. Yeah. And what's that? That's silk. And you're right, mulberry. Thank you. That's what the silkworm would eat it, turn into whatever you call that, and then they'd pull out all the little pieces. We came pretty close in having some successful silk production here in Goose Creek, but the last big attempt ended when the barn that had the silk in it burned. And the guy said, the heck with that, I'm not trying that anymore. And he got into the rice business. Naval stores was something that we could contribute to the British mercantile system. We had a lot of trees, and we could get the sap, the tar, the turpentine, and the boards and the mast, we could get masts out of the trees for ships. George Chicken ended up coming into the record around 1700, and I say that is because I could not find any earlier account of George Chicken anywhere except his baptismal records, which was over in England, in Northumbria, England. And I'm digressing a little bit, but he was about 18 years old when he came to South Carolina. He came here on a ship with another family, the Durhams. How many people are fishermen? Have you ever fished in Durham Creek, Durham Boat Landing? That's the family that came along with the chicken. You ever fish in Chicken Creek? Because that's where their plantations were side by side. And he came over here and ended up getting a plantation. What was I talking about? About 1700? I forget where I was going with that thought. But, I saw he was on a ship with a family along with his family. And he stayed in Charleston. The ship stopped in Charleston. And then a few days later went down to Beaufort, and about 50 members of his party established a little community down in Beaufort. And then I haven't been able to trace that anywhere either. It was there for about 10 or 15 years, and then it disappeared from the records. He stayed in Charleston and became a dominant personality. Matter of fact, he became number 2 in the authority here in Carolina, the second most powerful man in Carolina. And he wasn't royalty. That's the special secret we're kind of dealing with tonight. This guy became a dominant personality in South Carolina, and he was not royalty, had no touch with royalty at all. Thank you, Tony, for giving me this piece of his daily log that he would keep. And you can't read it, but they have those down, copies of those down at the Historical Society, and you can read some of the things that George Chicken would write. He was literate, and that was extremely rare to be able to read or write back in the day. Pack horses sometimes galled, G-A-U-L-L-D, after 20 miles of burden. That's what he wrote in his day book. And every day he would keep a day book, write down 1 or 2 sentences on what he did that day. And George Chicken emerged a pack horse trader, a planter, a civil servant, an Indian commissioner, a militia commander, and a judge. He was literate. Horses galled. Galled means that the packs you have on your back, every time the horse takes a step, they move a little bit, just a little bit, little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and after about mile 18, they're still moving, and you're starting to get a sore spot on you. And after a while, the horse is not going to move. And if you beat him with a stick on the back, he might take another step, but stop because it hurts. He's galled. And that word is not a real word, it's not spelled that way, but that's how he spelled it in his day book. And so he started staying at a camp. It was at the 22-mile marker. He started staying at that camp because he pushed his horses until they galled. And then he let it take them off, and that was 4 miles farther down the road than the 18-mile house. And this is where his campsite was. One of the members of our St. James Goose Creek Chapel of Ease, she's our secretary, Paula, and she's there to just kind of give you an idea how huge that tree is in the park. But after relieving his beasts of their burdens and studying each for abrasions and applying bear grease ointment as needed, he ended the first day of his outgoing trek and the last day of his return at rest on the high campground. There's the campground today. It's beautiful, isn't it? No wonder he stayed there. Look, it has that nice stream going through there. And I've been sticking my nose around there and poking around for decades now, and that stream always has water in it. And it has springs along the bank. So it's a good place to have horses, good place to camp.
Whereabouts was it, 22 miles?
22 miles from Charleston. Yeah, well, you would make fun of me. I'm going to tell you where it is. I'm going to show you where that is. That's really one of my missions tonight. And I'll get together a group. We can go out there and visit if you like. You know, a lot of you all look like you're retired, so I can get about 7 in my car. And they also dug canals so he could float his products from he ended up getting a home here, but he could float it all the way to what later they called it Chicken Creek, but parts of Back River. There's Back River. Back River, if you're not a fisherman, you don't think much of Back River. You think, well, there's nothing there. It's a very important freshwater. George Chicken traded shrewdly. He borrowed 1,000 pounds sterling in 1704. to purchase more pack horses. Now, what is 1,000 pounds of sterling? What does that equal to in dollars? Any idea? I don't have a clue.
I want to say the current trade rate is, 1 pound is $1.50.
$1.50 for
$1.15.
dollar
Years ago, it was as high as $2.50.
for a pound.
Yeah.
Okay, so he borrowed $2,000 or so worth of stuff. Great, thank you so much. And he got more ponies. And he was known as a man of substance and influence because after 6 years of native trade, he proved his mettle and validated him sufficiently trustworthy to receive a proprietary land grant. And there's the land he bought, and it's the most strange piece of property shape that I've ever seen. But there it is. See how it goes like this, like here? And then it goes up, down, and then it goes over here. So here, and this is connected right here, and here. 275 acres by the camp where he would spend the night. And that's where he would put bear grease on his horses because they were galled, and then they would rest, take off the next day. But in that campsite, he began to covet the land that he was on and across the street. And so he got a 275 acres, which was peanuts back in those days. People would get land grants for $2,000 or $3,000. But he married a widow next door. But she was a 17-year-old widow. And he married her, and she just happened to be the owner of 1,150-acre plantation, including the camp that he was on. And see, what did he say?
He did well.
He did well. But you know, and you think, oh, those poor girls, they didn't have any options. They really didn't. And over and over and over again, when I do my research, when the man dies, the woman marries the man next door. If he's Bob, she'll look at everywhere that she touches on the land, because land is everything. And if she finds somebody that's not married, that's who gets married. And I'm not saying it's bad or anything. That's just it. That's just the way it was back then. So she married Catherine Bellamy, and they ended up having a great family. She wasn't literate. None of the children, I could have any evidence any of them were literate, but they all seemed to be very fine people. And they had 3 sons and 2 daughters. And if you get that book, the Goose Creek trilogy, the chicken trilogy, I'll try to find some more and bring them next week. And if you're my favorite, then I'll give you one. And it explains, it goes into the details of the kids, their sons and everything. Yes, ma'am?
I was able to look it up, and according to what I found, in 1705, 1 British pound would be equal to 2,321 US dollars.
Whoa, that's a lot of money, 1,000 pounds.
When you convert it to what it is
Today, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The conversion rate over time.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, that makes a difference.
So that would be like 23, let's see, if I'm doing the math right, $230,000 would be.
Holy smokes, but today's money. Like my first pack of cigarettes cost me 25 cents when I was in 6th grade, you know. They're $13 a pack in New York City now, yeah. George Chickens Jr., that is the only photograph of any of his, or pictures of artistic rendering of any of his children right here. That's George Chicken Jr. Chicken was a Goose Creek man. He was among the 2nd generation of settlers. The Goose Creek Men political party was well established when Chicken appeared in Carolina. He entered the political arena as a young man in the Common House of Assembly. And he was well educated. This is what I copied from one of his day books. The miserable weather was very, very rainy, and it froze as it feel. So this was one of those experiences I had. I could not make any sense out of his notes. I was trying to read them again and again and trying to make sense. And I was laying in bed there and I'm thinking,
High school teacher.
You couldn't read that.
I'm going to make you stand in the hallway for 15 minutes. And you know what I did? The teacher thing came into me because I thought, Mike, go in there, get your note, and read it out loud phonetically, like you teach 1st graders. And I came back and I read it, and the thing just came to life. And here I am. I'm lucky I live alone because I'd get arrested. But I'm in my study going, oh, my God, this is it. And I'm reading it aloud. The miserable weather was very rainy and cold. It froze as it fell. That's what it said. And once I learned how to do that, I could learn to read the rest of lots of the other stuff. Just read it out loud, phonetically, and the truth came to you. And this is the road, and this is his avenue of oaks right here. And it went back to a little house back here. I'm going to give you a picture of it that Tony drew for me. And this is people that live in this area today call it 22. Now, if you don't know any better, you'll say it's strawberry. Ah, people go, oh, strawberry, strawberry. It's not strawberry. The people that live along there, and I've gone along there, and I've gone to the church that's there, and I've asked congregation, they say they live at 22 miles from Charleston. And 23 is where the volunteer fire department is. Do you have that in your head? On old Highway 52? The old volunteer fire department is still there today. I mean, it's relatively new. That's where the 23-mile house tavern was. But at 22, he had his establishment. And let me see, where else is it? No, it's right up here. This is where he built a little chapel here later on. This is the 23-mile house tavern, but they call it Redheimer's at that time. And then down here was Breaker's Tavern, which was the 18-mile house. I'll let you just look at that. A was Grove Hall. B is his Chicken's home site, his settlement. Across the street at C is part of his plantation. You'll see where later on he built a little chapel right there. See in the shape of a cross? And D, that is the 23-mile house, and that's where the volunteer fire department is today. For y'all that are trying to get oriented, there was over here, somebody wanted me to orient you to where it is. Did that help?
Yeah.
Good, okay. You're welcome. Rice lands. Rice is what we finally discovered we could export to England and make a whole heck of a lot of money. Deerskins, yeah, deerskins, they loved it. But it didn't produce as much big money as rice. This is part of the campsite today. They traded virulently with the pirates until he got on the commission down in Charleston, ended up hanging about 50 of them. But the Westo Indian was the first tribes that specialized in slave raids and trade with European settlers in Carolina. The Westos was followed by others, including the Yamasee, Chickasaw, Congaree, and Creek. Historians estimate that from 1670 to 1715, between 24,000 and 51,000 native slaves were sold into slavery. That's a lot.
That's just in this area, right?
This is no, not just in this area. I would say all of Carolina,
Yeah, well, I mean,
because they shipped them out of Charleston.
right, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. This-
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you. North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina. Yes, sir. Pastor Francis Lejeau, who was the pastor there at the St. James Goose Creek Church, he wrote to his commissioner, "It is evident that our traders have promoted bloody wars this last year to get slaves." And the proprietor, Philip Ludwell, said, "Beware of the Goose Creek men." George Chicken was a Goose Creek man, and this was parts of his plantation that he developed with Catherine Bellamy. This was his road that went over to the Durham estate, which was the family that traveled with him from Northumbria, England, which is right near the Scottish line, right near the Hadrian's Wall. That's where he was. And I don't have a birth record on him, but I had baptismal records on him and the Durhams. And so that's how I estimated about how old he was. And Tony Young drew this for me just from reading stuff and having a wide, in-depth knowledge of how they built buildings back in the day. And it's not a beautiful building that a royalist would live in, but that's 99% of the people in Carolina lived in a building like this. If they were rich, if they were lucky, they lived there. The only reference that I had was in one of his journals, he said that his 3 sons slept in the attic upstairs. Okay. John Boone, when the Chicken and his colleagues wanted to get this church built for all the wrong reasons, they were going to use the church as a political institution, an iconic institution to keep control of the government. Because the fundamental Constitution said, we would rather you be an Anglican to come to Carolina. But if you're not an Anglican, it's okay. If you're a Protestant, a dissenter, I mean, not a Catholic, if you're a dissenter, you can come. If you're, what else did they say? You got a Protestant, you have a dissenter. There's other terms they use. But if you're Catholic, you cannot come. If you were an atheist, you could come. But the last thing was in the Constitution, if you were Catholic, you were not allowed to come here. Why? Well, Catholics are a pain in the neck, right? See? They are. I'm a Catholic. I know how that is. And they were, of course, France, their enemy, were Catholics. Portugal and Spain, they were Catholics, and they were the enemy. So they were not allowed to come out here. But they got the law passed to build the church, and this Joseph Boone said that all the scum they could rake together voted, then scoured to Goose Creek. Now, doesn't that sound a little familiar? I mean, some of the language that we're seeing today is such crude language, you're starting to pick that up in the media pretty regular now, too. Don't you agree, or am I just imagining that? Oh, yeah. Chicken joined the Common House of Assembly when he was 22 years old and got his second land grant and married Catherine. He joined 23 other men in the Charleston 10th Common House of Assembly in 1707. The atrocities of the Indians were just so outrageous that they began to spread throughout the New World. William Andrews, an Anglican missionary to the Mohawks in New York, explained to his superiors in London that the South Carolinians brought horrors upon themselves by cheating native families and kidnapping their children. And that's absolutely the truth. They're kidnapping the kids and selling them. News of the blatant sins of the Indian Commission reached the streets of London, where one Lord Proprietor upbraided the commissioners for allowing all these horrid, wicked things. And then the Indians tried to get back at them. There was 22 Indian tribes in South Carolina. They had never gotten along with each other ever before, but in this case, 22 of them allied together with one purpose in mind, and that was to kill every non-indigenous human being in Carolina. That means if you were white or if you were black, they were out to kill you and get rid of you. 22 tribes allied, and they first started the war on April 14, 1715, down at Pocataligo, which is kind of near Beaufort, down in that area. And 3 men from the commission went to talk to them because there were lots of complaints and carrying on about being unfair and being sinful. Thomas Nord, William Bray, and Samuel Warner. They negotiated with the Indians, thought they were doing a pretty good job, we think. They went to sleep the next morning before the sun came up. The Indians attacked them, bludgeoned 2 of them to death, and tied the 3rd one to a stake. And he cooked all day under a slow fire until he died. Now, how do I know that happened? Somebody wrote that, and I picked that up from a history book, but how do they know that? If there was 3 guys and they were all dead, the Indians didn't report it, I'm sure. So, but that's what was reported. It was a violent event that started the Yamasee War in 1715. And the Yamasee War in 1715 came incredibly close to meeting their objective and pushing every white and black person out of South Carolina. Chicken sent his family to Charleston, and then they formed a 30-mile radius around the Low Country, and men garrisoned under the command of James Moore II, that's the son of James, and Captain George Chicken at the stockades 22 miles west of the parsonage. Now that's not the 22-mile marker, that's 22 miles west. That's out by Wasmasaw Swamp. Do you know where Wasmasaw Swamp is? Yes, yes, thank you. Up along 176. It doesn't look like much. Park your car and try to walk through it sometime, because I have. I mean, just to kind of wide, it was a barrier. Nobody could cross that. Nobody could get through. I thought, the water's only up to your knees. You ought to be able to get through there. You cannot get through, especially if you have a pack horse. There's no way to get through there. It was a boundary. And so, the Indians began to kill the white folks. Captain Barker, see right up here? This is a map of that period. It says Captain Barker defeated in 1715. Barker's Folly, is that it? Okay. He was here it is. I did a close-up. I forgot. Captain Barker's defeated in 1715. He had about 100 and, how many men did he have? 120, Tony? He had 120 men. He was the leader of the militia. And here's the Wasmasaw Swamp I was talking about. It was a formidable barrier until after the Revolutionary War when State Road was put in, 176, and then they put a bridge across it. Other than that, it was a barrier to the west. You had the headwaters of the Edisto River, the headwaters of the Ashley River, you had the Wassamasal Swamp, and then you just couldn't get through. Lejeune traveled to the camp. That's where Chicken's camp was. He said, the greatest part of our women and children are in town. They are camped at the entrance of Captain Chicken's plantation. The greatest part of their women and children are in town. They are camped at the entrance to Captain Chicken's plantation. Hostilities followed the Santee River. They just came down the Santee River. They broke into this guy's home, or he invited them in. There's long stories about this. We'll talk a little bit about Hearn next week because we think that Watery Jack had a lot to do with betraying these people. And then after they killed Hearn and his family, they went further south and killed Shurkins. Young black and white men, many from Chicken's plantation, pulled up the Hickory Log Bridge, felled all of the wetland trees to clear out an open firing zone, cut logs from the forest on both sides of the Indian path, and posted the timbers in deep entrenchments across the gateway. So the idea was to not let them get to Goose Creek. They're coming down the Santee River. They're going to cut through where Monk's Corner ended up being built later, come straight on down into Goose Creek and through Goose Creek. The province is in danger of being lost, and our lives are threatened by the general conspiracy of the Indians that surround us from the borders of St. Augustine to Cape Fear. For homework tonight, I want you all to think, what would have happened if the 22 Indian tribes had been victorious and kicked all the white folks and the black folks out of Carolina? That's your homework. Come back and report. What do you think would happen? What do you think would happen?
I'd still live in Indiana.
My condolences. No, really, think about it. I have my own little theory, but it's kind of fun. What if they had won and they came, you're going to see they came very close to winning. And it was at Chicken's camp that he saved the day. The men at the camp saved the day. See the Santee River?
Mike,
Yes.
how did George Chicken get educated when nobody else was educated?
I don't know.
Well, where'd he come from?
He came from North Umbria, England.
Okay, so he was English,
Yes.
so he's probably educated.
Yeah, well, yes, I would think he was educated there, but the good question Mike asked is, people weren't educated back in those days. How come he was? Another thing, though, Mike, people didn't get in ships and travel halfway across the ocean, across the world, unless they had some special knowledge and some special courage and some discipline and determination. And, those are the kind of people that came to America. So he was one of those. But this is Thomas Barker. He says goodbye to his wife, Rebecca, and their son. And they lived right here where we're standing at the Button Hall. And you can see down the road, with their entrance was the 18 Mile House area. You see they're starting to assemble there in the forest, and that forest is Pineview subdivision. And then right here was Berkeley Square and Food Line right in there. A friend of mine drew that for me, and I appreciate it very much. Daunting days of May and June, 500 warriors attacked Goose Creek Militia Company of Thomas Barker. More than 24 young men died in the skirmish. I think that Watery Jack has a lot to do with that, and I have records that show that he rode ahead the day before. And I think he got all the Indians lined up and hidden under fallen trees that had resulted from a hurricane about 2 years before, and they were successful. Then they were successful in killing everybody at Shinkin's cow pens, where Captain James Redwood commanded more than 20 rugged cowmen. How did 20 rugged frontier cowmen get killed by a party of Native Americans? They asked to make peace. They said they didn't have any weapons. They showed that they had no weapons. They went in, but they were hiding weapons. And they attacked once they got in, and then they hooped, and the forest came alive with hundreds of Indians and rushed in there and killed them. And then they headed towards Goose Creek. There's Shinkin's cow pen right there. The campsite was right about here. Right about there was the campsite. So they're going to come down to the campsite. They're going to try to get into what they referred to as the rich Goose Creek area. The outlook was bleak by the middle of June when the hostiles turned towards Rich Goose Creek. I'm stopping again because this is important. This is where Chicken ordered that a wall be put up here, a breastwork of logs, and they dug a ditch right across here because the Indians are coming down this way from Monk's Corner, coming down this way. There was no Monk's Corner, but coming from the Santee River, coming down this way, and they wanted to get into Goose Creek. That's where they had the cattle and all the food and all the weapons and all the stuff. They wanted to get through here. They built that. Chicken told them to build that defensive wall here, and then he ran out and waited right here by the Wasmasaw Swamp. The Indians came down. They couldn't get through the wall. They can't go this way because through the water. What are they going to do, swim across? They can't go this way. The only way they could go would be this way, and he was there waiting for them. That was his plan, and he won and defeated them. The record is silent on the names of the men who mounted the walls at camp, but it's likely that Chicken's workers such as Hercules and Old Toby preferred to brave the wall with neighbors rather than huddle in frail cabins waiting to be butchered by the savages or carried off one by one. I tried to study it, find out as much as I could about his Chicken slaves. He had 16 slaves, and he referred to him as Hercules, not Hercules. I don't know why I made that mistake today. But they called him Hercules, which was short for Hercules, and I don't know anything about Old Toby. But he was the head slave, and he was the senior slave. And I expected both of them to be mounting the wall to defend their families and their plantation. Every family fled the town except in one place at the old camp, where 70 white men and 40 Negroes surrounded themselves with the breastwork and resolved to remain and defend themselves in the best manner they could. That was Francis Lejeune that wrote that. The black and white sharpshooters proffered a stubborn defense with musketeers atop the firing line. And they turned them back, and they went back towards Wassamassaw. All Sunday, as the natives advanced, towards the Captain George Chicken, they advanced all day long on that Sunday. And Chicken divided his men into 3 columns, one to protect Goose Creek so they couldn't turn towards Goose Creek, one to be at the Wasmasaw Swamp, and he was right in the middle. And here's my 3 columns. I'm kind of hurrying now. We're just at an hour. We got 30 more minutes, okay. Chicken is promoted after the war. He's promoted that prior August, the Assembly voted to create and pay an armed force consisting of 1 Lieutenant General, James Moore II, and 1 Colonel, George Chicken, along with Lieutenant Colonels, Majors, and Captains. Moore and Chicken were referred to as the dynamic duo. Now here, by the officials, like the commissioners of the time, they referred to them as the dynamic duo. And these are 2 very opposite people. There's James Moore, who was a descendant of royalty and deserved, because of his bloodline, to have a large plantation, and we're on part of it here tonight in a good location. And then here comes Chicken. He was literate, but he didn't have land, he didn't have a darn thing, he didn't have a pot when he got here, but he traded and he was disciplined and made some money and made a name for himself and became a member of that dynamic duo. And so he started going off and trying to make peace with the Cherokee, working for the governor. Lieutenant General Moore and Colonel Chicken led the Goose Creek men political faction as well as the provincial army, and undoubtedly reigned as the most dynamic pair in Carolina. Within that formidable context, Moore, Chicken, and their Goose Creek allies conspired to effect a revolution to oust the proprietary governor. And the Goose Creek men again controlled the native trade. I'm trying to kind of hurry through this. And the House of Commons created a public monopoly employing 5 commissioners to supervise the trading business. They tagged Chicken's plantation as one of the 9 trading posts. Imagine that. Yeah, politics. He was in charge, so he make money. Yeah, we'll be one of those. Suspicious Governor Robert Johnson did not invite Chicken to his council in 1719. Hoping to abate a rising call for insurrection, but George Chicken mounted as colonel of the Berkeley Regiment that year, and from that influential status and authority cooperated with James Moore II, Arthur Middleton, and other Goose Creek neighbors to, quote, free themselves from the proprietors and get under the king's government. That was the first rebellion. Who said that? Thank you. That was the first revolution in South Carolina, was the Royal Revolution of 1719. And then was the second one, we're going to talk about that too, right here in Goose Creek, was the American Revolution. Stede Bonnet, Chicken was one of the 3 judges that started hanging slaves. The Goose Creek men blamed the proprietors for everything, even slaves, even the pirates, even though they were trading with the pirates for decades before. But in the last 2 months of 1718, 49 pirates were hanged in Charlestown. All of the Goose Creek men signed the petition to rid the proprietors and let the king appoint a governor. Within 3 years of Chicken's pivotal charge, his commander in war and colleagues in peace, James Moore II, ascended to the position of governor, the highest office in Carolina. Now, here's some interesting things. In 1725, Colonel Chicken announced that he was ready to serve his country as an emissary to the Cherokee, and that summer, Governor Middleton sent Commissioner George Chicken into the wilderness to counteract the influence of the French. The Common House of Assembly authorized 500-pound stipend to Chicken for his service as emissary and later increased the amount. He started inspecting the trading centers. And at one of the trading centers down here, you see down here below, it says Captain George Chicken of the Colonial Militia recorded that he, quote, killed a buffalo, end quote, while camping with his men. He meant to say buffalo. Thank you.
That's from 96.
Pardon me?
That was from 96.
What's 96?
That's where he was.
Oh, at the town of 96, thank you. Yeah, he was sent out to check everybody that was trading with had a authorized trading license with the Indians. He went around and checking everybody, make sure they had a license, they were acting appropriately, and he could fire or appoint just by himself. The Common House authorized him to grant or revoke trading licenses at will, stating that Colonel Chicken is empowered to leave blank licenses in the hands of such a proper person as he thinks fit. At Kiowa, the Cherokee chief titled King Crow came out in a great chair to welcome Chicken. The cordial meeting was punctuated by many formalities, including copious fanning of the visitors with eagle feathers and smoking peace pipes. Finally, King Crow announced that he, quote, long expected a beloved man of the English to arrive with good tidings. Colonel Chicken, after that visit, reported, these people are so well affected to us that they may be brought in any measure. So he had brought peace among the Indians in Carolina. The Cherokee promised to arrest any Frenchmen who came among them. Chicken reported that head warrior got up and told his people in the Indian town that they had been brought up after another manner than their forefathers, and they could not live without the English. This was the drawing of the Chapel of Ease that Colonel Chicken gave the land and arranged for the construction of this cruciform-shaped chapel at his camp. And I'm serious, if you all want to meet me out there one day or meet me here, and I can get 6 or 7 people in my car and we can have a carpool, go there and I can show you where that church is. We have a committee that protects it. And a friend of mine, Ann Yarborough, drew this. This is a cruciform rendering of the Chapel of Ease. The way we did this, we had a group of about 12 people that studied it historically, because there's no pictures of it or photographs, and just advised her how to do it and make changes. And she came back probably 6 or 8 times until we were stopped telling her what changes to make. Kind of a, what else can you do? And that's just a close-up. You can see the cruciform shape of the chapel. And then there I am with my really cool bicycle. I told you I was a nerd. That's my really cool bicycle. Big fat tires, rusty. But that's the chapel site. Do you recognize that, folks? Along old Highway 52? Well, please take a moment to spin in there and make yourself at home and look around and think about what you found out tonight.
Are there any remains of the?
Yes, there's piles of brick. I would love to show you that.
I'd love to see
Would
it.
you tell us something about the flag that was made at the 18 Mile House?
Yes. Well, you know, I got a bunch of junk in my head. You mean after after when we declared war against the Yankees?
Yeah.
I was going to say damn Yankees, but you were all adults. The 18 Mile House Tavern has a very rich history. I just touched on it because that's where their story begins. And in subsequent lectures, we'll get into the flag that they made and all that. Be happy to do that. And this is still the camp today. That's what it looks like. And what does that say right there? Strawberry, oh, I'm sorry, I'm over here. This is where you are. Here's the church, the chapel site. This is Old Highway 52 coming up from Goose Creek. Old Highway 52. This is State Road. And this is where we are tonight, right here. Right down here is where we are right now. Go right on up. And if you get up to the volunteer fire department, which is right here, you've gone too far. This is Cypress Garden Road right here. Okay. And this is one of the plantations on Chicken Creek. It says right here, it says remains of Mr. Chickens. Remains of Mr. Chickens. And that's his son's plantation, which was next to his. And this is what Chicken Creek looked like the last time I went fishing on it. Didn't catch anything. And then back in the day when I would do scuba diving along the river there, I had to quit scuba diving over years because my wetsuit kept getting smaller and smaller. Well, you know, it shrinks as you get it wet, and then you lay it out in the sun, it'll shrink up. I can't even get my leg in it now, you know, but these are some things that I found in the Cooper River, right there around Strawberry Ferry and around Cypress Gardens and Dean Hall. And these are all, the ones here in the middle are stone. So this must have been brought down from at least Columbia or farther north. And then it was honed to be able to carry a handle. And then this is pottery, Indian pottery, and arrowheads. And then I just laid a pillowcase out on my kitchen floor and took a photograph of the other stuff that I got at the ferry landing, which is right in that area, the Strawberry Ferry. And so you can tell how people lived. They lived pretty doggone nicely there. You can see their cutlery and their pottery, and here's your pipe. And it's very, very unusual to find an anchor. And it was the first time I was diving off one of the ferry landing site when I found that anchor. That was just sheer luck. What'd you say, Tony?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I said it's unusual to find an entire pipe.
Oh, that's not entire. Well, yeah, that's two pieces. You see right there in the middle, right here?
Both pieces.
It is broken. You're right. It was unusual to find both pieces. Yes, sir. And that's the chapel site today. I'd be very pleased to take you up there. And they ended up building a Baptist church there called Bethlehem Baptist Church right next to the chapel site. And so many of these graves are from there. And then we had the archaeological Department of Archaeology from South Carolina Department of History and Archaeology. They sent a team down to do some digging, and these are some of the remnants of the chapel. You can see it. And finally, the Goose Creek men dominated the colonial government. They installed James Moore II as caretaker governor until the first royal governor arrived in 1720. The political history of Goose Creek during the period of 1670 to 1719 was one of protest, dissent, and chicanery. The power of the Goose Creek men waned, but the old party emerged from time to time to challenge colonial authority. Problems with currency, court, representation, and other issues persisted until the American Revolution. Would the Goose Creek men answer the call to arms when the winds of revolution stir in 1776? That's my question to you tonight. What do you think? Okay, ma'am, you say yes. Why do you think yes? Because they're just a tough, arrogant bunch of guys?
I don't think they liked all the being told what to do. Because of the British.
Very nice. Okay. Well, how do y'all think that the sons and daughters of the royalists and the sons and daughters of the do you think they would be in favor of fighting against the and England? Some did and some didn't. Well, Chickens kind of guys might, and then of course the royalists. I don't think they wanted to do anything unless it was good for them. I think they were very selfish. If they could fight and they thought they could win, it'd be good for them, okay. But it's very, very confusing. It's a very confusing war. Like Middleton stayed at the Oaks and would not sign the Declaration of Independence, but his son Arthur did. And the families were divided, and the church was divided. And when we get to that, you'll see how important Goose Creek was in telling that story. I love this picture here that two of my friends here from the art they were on the art commission. That's Chicken Senior on the left, that's his son in the middle, and their little daughter, Little Mistress Chicken. And this is one of the pictures out of the book Little Mistress Chicken, which was published about 1904. And it's the third book. It's the third book in the Chicken trilogy that I gave to some of you all tonight. I'll bring some more tomorrow.
Chained to the tomb at
Charlesbury. Yeah, she was tied by her schoolmaster. She was tied to as a punishment, and then he forgot, and she left her there most of the night. There's Chicken House down in 1731. You know, he came here with nothing. He lived on a pack horse, and he lived in a campsite, and then he ended up being a big wig and having a house downtown and everything. Here's his house that was built in 1731. Downtown Goose Creek, yes, ma'am. And the Chicken trilogy, there's the book. And lecture 3 is the one I'm really, really interested in. Tonight was kind of an effort. It was kind of like whatever. But I'm telling you, you know, you're like family, okay? So I thought, okay, I'll do it. I'll come up there and do it. But this is going to be a really good one, especially because I'm still developing, trying to find the truth about things, such as Watery Jack. I think he did some evil things. And Blackbeard the pirate, the stuff written about him is wrong. And I'll tell you the true stuff about Blackbeard. And you're going to love it. See anything else? That's it. Any questions, folks?
The mile marker stones.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope we can get more chairs next time. And please come back. I just feel very honored. And especially when I get to see old friends that don't bother to come to the gym anymore. And, it's so good to see all of you. But what, do you have questions? We got about 10 more minutes.
The mile marker stones, you keep referring, did they actually put a stone and a number on them every mile or so?
No.
Thank you very much.
But they did in some places, and the stones disappeared or got stolen. Because people needed stones. There was no such thing as a stone, nothing but clay around here. So they would steal stones as a hearth in their fireplaces at home, or for lots of different reasons. So those stones were not very...
Did I miss something? But how did Goose Creek get its name to begin with?
I wrote a book in 1983, and I explained how Goose Creek got its name. No, let me just... In 1983, I wrote my first book, and I explained how Goose Creek got its name, and I went back and read it again a few months ago, and I was wrong. Because the reason I'm telling you that, it took a while for me to develop the truth. I had to read a lot of stuff. Maurice Matthews was James Moore's buddy. Matter of fact, Maurice, he named his son Maurice after his friend Maurice Moore. Maurice Moore worked for the colonial government as a surveyor. When they would give land out, he would go around and survey it. And on his early surveys and plats, he referred to this area, this waterway, as "Hong." And I would say it out loud, what is Hong? And he spelled it A-N-T-H-A-U, Althon, and A-D-T-H-A-N, Althon. And he did that, and finally he wrote in his day book, and you don't know anything, let's say, he wrote down that it was the name of the creek was, the Indians were making the sound of the goose, onk, onk. And they were making the sound of the goose, and he wrote, because of the abundance of geese and other waterfowls, and I about fell out of the chair when I saw that. Because of the abundance of geese and other waterfowls. So that question is solved. Maurice Moore named the creek Goose Creek because the Indians called it onk, onk. It's not that funny. It's not. Okay, and listen, come next week. You're going to love these ghost stories. And there's not just, oh, we're going to tell you something scary and go woo, woo, woo. No, we explain why those stories are important, why they've lasted for hundreds of years, and why we need to know those stories because they will affect our lives. Okay, thank you all.